Hello Physics 1 students, and welcome to our online tutorial for the Lab 0 practice in Excel. Also welcome any random people who may have stumbled upon this video looking for Excel help. So the purpose of this exercise is just to familiarize you with Excel, because we're going to be using Excel every week to collect our data in lab. So by the end of this, you'll be very familiar with how to do everything that you need to do in Excel. All right, so we're going to start off really simple with our data entry sheet. Okay, we're going to do a simple mathematical function in Excel. We're going to divide D by T. All right, so the first thing that you want to do when you're performing a mathematical function in Excel is you want to hit the equal sign. This tells Excel that you're trying to do a mathematical equation. So we want to do D divided by T, so that's going to be C2 divided by B2, right? So in order to get C2 and B2 in there, I can either click on the cell or I can type the name of the cell. So I'll show you what typing looks like for the numerator. So that's C2, I just typed that in. Then I'm going to divide by B2, so I'm going to click on the cell this time and hit enter, okay? And you can see we have calculated the speed for the first row. All right, or distance over time. All right, so one thing that I really like about Excel is I don't need to type this equation over and over again. If I'm doing the same equation, I can put my cursor in the bottom right-hand corner of the cell, and I can either drag this formula down as many rows as I want, or I can double-click it if I want it to be performed in the entire table. So a situation where you might want to drag is if you don't want it to continue throughout the entire table. Okay, so let's just say that I only wanted to perform this formula in the first two rows. I would click and drag just down to the second row, and you can see now that we have C3 divided by B3, right? Which is the correct equation for the second row. And then it hasn't done anything in these cells down here. However, I do want this equation to be in all of the rows of this table, so I'm going to hover my mouse in the bottom right-hand corner of the cell, and this time I'm going to double-click. So you'll notice now that it's propagated the formula all the way down to the end of the table, okay? Which is exactly what I wanted. So now we're going to move on to averages. So we're going to find the averages of the time, the distance, and the speed. Okay, so I could just click and drag once I get this equation in here the first time, but I'm going to show you a couple different ways of entering equations. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit my equal sign, right, because I'm performing a mathematical equation in Excel. Then I'm going to start typing the word average. As soon as it pops up, I'm going to double click, and then it prompts me to tell it what series of numbers I want to find the average of. Well, I want to find the average of the times. Okay, so I highlight all my times, close the parenthesis, and hit enter. Okay, so for the next cell, this is going to be for all you super fast and accurate typers out there. If you don't want to multitask between typing and clicking, you can just type in average, right? So I could type equals average, open my parenthesis, and then I can highlight these, right? Or if I wanted to, I don't have to highlight them, right? If I don't even want to go to the mouse, I can look up, I can see that that's C2 and put a colon in, and it needs to go down to C7, all right? And then I can close my parentheses and hit enter, okay? Never even have to touch the mouse. Last but not least, I'm just going to show you that when you have simple mathematical equations, you actually don't have to close the parenthesis. Excel will figure out how to do that on its own, all right? If you do have a really complicated equation where you've got tons of parentheses and a lot of mathematical functions going on, you're probably going to want to figure out where you need to put your parentheses, because Excel can make mistakes, you know, trying to guess what you were trying to do, okay? So I'm going to hit my equal sign, I'm going to type in average, right? Select it, and then I'm going to highlight the values I want, and then I'm just going to hit enter. I'm not going to type in the parenthesis, right? And you can see if I click back in this cell up here that it closed the parenthesis for me, right? I never typed that parenthesis, but there it is, okay? So As I mentioned before, I didn't actually have to type out this equation multiple times. I could have just hovered my mouse in the bottom right-hand corner and dragged it across, and you'll notice we have the same values once again, right? 5.1 and 0.3. All right, now we're going to move on to the standard deviation. So the standard deviation basically is telling you what the variation between numbers is in a series. And in here, in physics, we're only going to be working with the sample standard deviation, not the population standard deviation. I know that there are bio students in here, and in your bio classes, you'll be working with the population standard deviation. But in that case, you'll have millions and millions of data points to work with, where you can actually surmise a population mean. In this class, for better or worse, fortunately or unfortunately, we will not be gathering millions of data points, all right? We're just going to have a small sample of data that we're working with, so we're only going to use the sample standard deviation. So now we're back to the standard deviation in Excel. So I'm going to hit the equal sign because I'm performing math, right? I'm going to start typing out standard deviation. Now I see the formula that I want, which is STDEV.S, right? We don't want P, we don't want the population standard deviation, we want the sample, so I double click that. Then I'm going to highlight the numbers that I'm finding the standard deviation for. Since this is the first column, I want to find the standard deviation between all the times. So I enter all the times, and there we go. Now we have the standard deviation for all the times. We want to do exactly the same thing for distance and speed, so I'm just going to go ahead and drag this equation along, and now we have the sample standard deviation for distance and speed. All right, so the last thing that we want to find in this table is we want to find final minus initial. So final minus initial is going to be our final value in the table minus our initial or our first value in the table. Okay, so we're going to do that for time, we're going to do that for distance, and then we're going to do that for speed. So first things first, let's do the time. So we take our final time, we subtract our initial time, and we hit enter. So since we're going to be doing the same thing for distance and speed, I'm going to go ahead and drag this across the table. All right. And now we only have one more thing that we need to calculate, which is delta D over delta T. So delta D is going to be this value here, and delta T is going to be this value here, right? Essentially what we did when we did final minus initial is we found the change in distance and we found the change in time, right? Delta D and delta T. All right, so we hit equals, let Excel know that we're doing math. Then we're going to select delta D, divide it by delta T. And there we go. We've got the last equation that we needed to calculate for part 1. All right, so that concludes part 1. I will see you in part 2.